And we return to the subject of veterans on this day, honoring them. Now the problems many face in finding a job back home. NewsHour economics correspondent Paul Salman updates a story he filed earlier this year. It's part of his regular reporting on making sense of financial news.
If I owned a business and somebody took a bullet for me, I can at least give that person a job at my corporation.
Edmund Sheffield worked as a military policeman while in the service. He got out in 2010.
I applied maybe 100 jobs.
Eric Vidalma served in Baghdad, left the Air Force in 2008. All he could find, a part-time gig at IKEA.
I didn't have enough money to make ends meet.
Deborah Bain did a 6-year hitch.
You feel like you've lost who you are as a person, your value.
Just 3 of more than 2 million Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. Over 12% were jobless last month, compared to 9% for the total population. For vets aged 18 to 34, the rate was 16.6%. The problem took center stage in Washington this week. On Monday, President Obama outlined a plan that offers veterans personalized career counseling and new web resources to assist them in their job hunt.
Unemployment among veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan continue to rise. That's not right. It doesn't make sense. Not for our veterans, not for our families, not for America, and we're determined to change that.
Yesterday, in a rare show of unity, the Senate overwhelmingly passed a jobs package which includes employer tax incentives to hire unemployed vets. Part of the $447 billion jobs bill the president announced in September. Under the plan, firms that hire jobless vets would get a maximum $5,600 credit per veteran and a maximum of $9,600 for each disabled veteran hired. Paul Rieckhoff founded and runs IAVA, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America.
They're coming home from serving our country, sometimes multiple tours, and their welcome home is an unemployment check.
Rieckhoff has been urging Congress to do something all year. We spoke with him in March as he and other vets stormed the Hill to ask members to help thin the jobless ranks.
So if folks want to support the troops and they want to support the veterans, hire them.
Himself an Iraq vet, Rieckhoff says it's an outrage. You learn the key job skills while serving your country: selflessness, loyalty, teamwork, leadership. But to employers, you've fallen behind.
And it's not like folks are waiting back home to say, hey, buddy, let me explain to you all that you missed while you were gone. You feel like Rip Van Winkle, like you woke up and that everybody else has been moving on with life and you've been sleeping for a year and a half.
Programs like the Veterans Curation Project have been trying to ease the transition by teaching vets current computing skills, for example, how to archive artifacts found during Army Corps of Engineers projects. Corps archaeologist Sonny Trimble had the idea after a tour in Iraq digging up mass graves.
People that kept us alive and guarded us all the time, day in and day out, were soldiers and Marines, 24 hours a day, around us while we're working, guarding us while we slept at night. I wanted to pay these individuals back.
A job that pays up to $14.50 an hour, funded by the Army Corps of Engineers. A quiet alternative to the sudden jolt of the job market.
It's a complete 180 turnaround.
Edmund Sheffield joined the archaeology program last November after beating the pavement for months.
Just going throughout your whole military career is structure, 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 instructions, instructions, instructions. And some people just can't just snap your fingers and be like, hey, I'm a civilian, I'm no longer in the military.
In the military, there's a sense of security with, financial security, and there's also a sense of community. When I separated, I lost all that. I was isolated out here in Maryland, and so that made going to school incredibly difficult.
Eric Vidalma was one of the 500,000 vets who've used the expanded GI Bill, which pays for public college tuition, housing, and books. But the time and place were out of joint.
I remember walking out into the courtyard, and I smelled marijuana. That sort of thing, for me coming out of the military, that's, absolutely unacceptable. And that also creates makes me also feel a little more isolated because I don't fit into that group.
Vidalma dropped out. Though so many of her peers do not, Deborah Bain has a BA. She began her master's at community college, but had to continue her studies online.
There were individuals that were forming their own little class when the teacher was conducting the class, and I felt that was disrespectful. It was disruptive behavior that I just couldn't tolerate.
This program helps vets ease back into civilian life. Instead of hero one day, nobody the next.
You know, just being in uniform, you stop somewhere, hey, would you like a sandwich? Thanks for serving our country. A handshake, you know, but you walk around with your little veteran ID, it's like, oh, you serve the country. That'd be $5.50.
Another issue. Today, less than 1% of the population has served in Iraq or Afghanistan. So most civilian employers may not understand military experience.
When an applicant applies and has a bachelor's degree, the employer knows what the employee knows. In the military, they probably don't know what we've done, don't have a good idea of our skills.
Employers admit to other fears. In a survey last year, 46% of human resource managers agreed that PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other mental health issues posed a challenge. Emmanuel Riley left the Army after returning from Afghanistan in 2005. He lives in a housing unit provided by a nonprofit.
I was a combat engineer. Along with that is we can detach landmines, IEDs.
So your job involves disarming explosives?
Yes. And lost some friends that were part of my unit due to my particular job in the military. Well, sometimes can define your life after service.
Like what?
Alcohol abuse, drinking a lot. Sometimes nightmares. A lot of those, a lot of nightmares.
Riley didn't know he had PTSD. He wound up homeless, living in a storage unit.
Divorced, lost my family, lost quite a bit.
Now sober and in treatment for his PTSD, Riley's looking hard for a job. According to a 2008 RAND study, nearly 1/3 of Iraq and Afghanistan vets had symptoms of PTSD, major depression, or had experienced a traumatic brain injury. Deborah Bain is still haunted by the Iraq morgue in which she volunteered.
When you see certain things in life that makes no sense, you pretty much lose a sense of self. It tears you apart.
Even Corps archaeologist Sonny Trimble struggled with PTSD.
You don't realize that what the war's done is kind of whittled you away. It's kind of sanded you away, like with fine sandpaper. And you can't do a lot of the things you could do in the past. I wouldn't come out of my house on the weekend for over a year.
Is it illegitimate, then, for employers to harbor some fear of worst-case scenarios, like flashbacks or becoming violent, going postal?
The military doesn't have a problem with us being postal, but we carry guns. You see what I'm saying?
Well, as far as PTSD goes, are employers asking the same question if someone's blind? PTSD is an illness, or but it's manageable.
The vets completed the program this spring. Bain is now in culinary school. Fidalmo worked at the Bureau of Economic Analysis until last month. He's now looking for another job. Sheffield is too. He decided against a commission-based insurance gig and is temping to get by.
Thank you for your service.
Hundreds of thousands of other Iraq and Afghanistan veterans are jobless too, and thousands more are slated to return in the months ahead.
There's more about the economic and emotional problems facing returning veterans on tonight's edition of the PBS program, Need to Know.